My name's Cameron Doyle. 45 years old, 22 of them behind the wheel of a semi. Not the glamorous life, but it paid the bills, kept food on the table, and kept Dana, my wife, in the kind of lifestyle she always seemed to want. The road was my second home. Diesel fumes and static-filled AM radio, rest stops that smelled like burnt coffee, long nights staring through a windshield where the headlights felt like the only company I had. My body knew the rhythm, 3 weeks out, 1 week home. Dana never liked it, but she liked what the money bought. For weeks before it happened, I'd felt this tightness in my chest. Nothing dramatic, just a little pinch whenever I climbed in and out of the cab or carried a load of straps. Stress, I told myself. Just long hours, bad coffee, maybe a little too much fast food. That's what you do when you're a trucker, you explain away the pain because stopping isn't an option. But that night, somewhere outside Omaha, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It hit like a fist. Crushing pain, radiating down my arm, sweat soaking through my shirt in the middle of February. I had to pull the rig onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking into the darkness. My hand shook as I dialed 911. By the time the helicopter came, I was gasping like a fish out of water. The last thing I remember was the ER doctor's face leaning over me, her voice urgent, "We're losing him." That's not exactly the kind of thing you want to hear before everything goes black. 2 days later, I woke up with tubes in my arms and a stent in my heart. A nurse with tired eyes told me I'd flatlined twice. Twice. She said I was lucky to be alive. But lying there in that hospital bed, I didn't feel lucky. When I reached for my phone, I thought maybe Dana had been calling. Maybe she'd been worried, waiting by my bedside, praying. That's what a wife does, right? But there was only one message. A screenshot of our joint account balance, $0. Below it, her words, "I deserve this after everything I've done for you." $61,438.72. My emergency fund. My truck maintenance account. My retirement cushion. Years of careful saving, gone in one swipe of her hand. I stared at that number until the screen dimmed. You'd think I'd feel rage, betrayal, panic. But the truth. I felt nothing. Just a bone-deep exhaustion that no sleep could touch. I thumbed a reply, just a single emoji. Thumbs up sign. That was it. No questions. No begging. No anger. Just a small, quiet acknowledgement. The doctor came in later, clipboard in hand. "You need rest, Mr. Doyle. No stress. No driving for at least 6 weeks. Someone will pick you up tomorrow." Yeah, I lied. But I already knew, I wasn't going home. And Dana had no idea the man she thought she'd buried, both in body and in trust, was about to stand back up. I stared at that phone until my eyes burned. $61,438.72, numbers I knew as well as my own birthday, because I'd built that safety net dollar by dollar, haul by haul, through snowstorms in Montana and blistering summers in Arizona. It wasn't just money. It was security. It was years of sacrifice. And now it was gone. The human body is strange, how it reacts to betrayal after surviving death itself. You'd think I'd explode, tear the four from my arm, curse her name. But I didn't. All I felt was hollow. As if the heart attack had drained the last drop of emotion out of me. That thumbs up emoji I sent her. It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't surrender either. It was something worse, detachment. The kind that comes when you realize the person you trusted most doesn't even see you as a person anymore. The monitors beside me beeped steadily, a machine reminding me I was still alive when part of me wished I wasn't. I imagined Dana at home, maybe sipping wine in the kitchen we'd remodeled last spring, the new countertops gleaming under the lights. Did she feel relief when she saw the balance hit 0? Triumph. Freedom. The doctor's words echoed in my mind, rest, avoid stress, no driving for at least 6 weeks. As if stress was optional now. He asked if someone was picking me up. I lied and said yes. I couldn't bring myself to explain that the only person who should have been there was already gone. That night, in the darkness of that hospital room, I made a quiet vow. I wasn't going back to that house. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The truth is, Dana thought she'd cleaned me out. Thought she'd taken everything. But she hadn't counted on one thing: you don't survive 22 years on the road without keeping something tucked away for a rainy day. I reached for my phone again, not to text her, not to beg for answers. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't dialed in months. My brother Jeff. A man who knew disappointment, betrayal, and the cold taste of starting over. It was time to make the call. When Jeff picked up, his voice was the same as always, steady, no nonsense, the kind of tone you trust without thinking. Need a favor, I said. Name it, he answered, no hesitation. I need a place to crash for a few days. And I need you not to tell Dana. There was a pause on the other end. Long enough for me to hear the unspoken question. She doesn't know you're alive. Oh, she knows, I said, staring at the hospital ceiling. She just doesn't know I'm not coming home. Jeff didn't press. That's the thing about brothers, they don't need every detail to understand the weight in your voice. The next morning, he was there. Big frame, work boots dusty from the construction site. He helped me shuffle out of the hospital, careful with my arm, like I was made of glass. Neither of us said much during the drive. The silence was easier than words. Jeff's place wasn't fancy. A 2-bedroom house with tools stacked in the corner, half-finished projects everywhere, beer bottles lined on the counter. But to me it felt like sanctuary. A place where I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. You should eat something, Jeff said, sliding a sandwich across the table. I wasn't hungry. My stomach had been a knot since the moment I saw that bank balance. But I took a bite anyway. It tasted like nothing. That night, I lay in his guest room staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slow, steady circles. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, my mind replayed the years with Dana, the small red flags I had ignored. I remembered how we'd met at a gas station outside Cheyenne. She was stranded with a flat tire, and I was the guy who stopped to help. She looked at me like I was some kind of hero, just because I knew how to use a jack. Funny how the things that impress someone at first eventually become the things they resent. 6 months later, we were married. Quick, but not reckless. Or so I thought. I was 30, she was 27. Old enough to know better, young enough to believe in promises. At first, she called me every night when I was on the road. Sometimes we talked for hours. As the years went on, those calls shrank, an hour became 10 minutes, 10 minutes became 5, and eventually just a text, made it to Nashville. All good here. I should have noticed when she stopped asking when I'd be home. I should have asked more questions when she started taking trips with friends I never met. But I trusted her. That's what marriage is supposed to be, trust. Now, staring at the ceiling in Jeff's spare room, that trust felt like the punchline to a cruel joke. On my 3rd day there, my phone buzzed with a message. It was Harold, our neighbor. A man I'd shared beers with, borrowed tools from, trusted to keep an eye on the house when I was on the road. Haven't seen you around. Everything okay? Dana's got some guy over. Thought you should know. I sat with that for a long time, phone heavy in my hand. My chest didn't hurt anymore, at least not physically. But deep inside, something twisted tighter than any heart muscle ever could. Grief comes in waves, but strategy comes in silence. By the 3rd morning at Jeff's, I was done lying in bed waiting for clarity. Dana thought she'd buried me under hospital sheets. She thought I was finished. But the road teaches you one thing: you keep moving forward, even when the map runs out. Jeff drove me downtown, not to our regular bank branch where Dana and I were known, but to the main office, where anonymity was easier. My body still ached from surgery, every step reminding me how close I'd come to death, but I walked into that bank with a kind of grim resolve. I need to speak with a fraud specialist, I told the receptionist. The woman behind the desk kept her tone professional, but when I explained, when I showed her the screenshot of the drained account and said the words hospitalized, unconscious, withdrawals without my consent, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Pity. Maybe even a little anger on my behalf. Mr. Doyle, she said carefully, we can initiate a fraud investigation. But because it was a joint account, and your wife had equal access, it may be difficult. I understand, I cut in, my voice steady. But I'd like to try. She nodded, tapping at her keyboard. We'll need hospital records confirming your incapacity. Documentation that you were medically unable to authorize withdrawals. Not a problem. And you should know, she added, lowering her voice, if this escalates, law enforcement could get involved. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm aware. On the ride back, Jeff kept glancing at me from behind the wheel. You really want to go down this road, Cam? Cops, courts, lawyers, it's gonna get ugly. She made it ugly the second she cleared that account while I was fighting for my life, I said. We stopped for gas. I stayed in the truck, staring through the windshield as Jeff filled the tank. Across the lot, a father bought his kids ice cream from the convenience store. Normal life, moving along like nothing had happened. My life felt like a storm had ripped through it, but outside, the world didn't care. Back at Jeff's, I made 3 phone calls. The first, to my dispatcher. I told him I'd need extended medical leave. He didn't ask questions, just wished me a speedy recovery. The second, to the credit union where I kept a small business account, one Dana never knew about. Not because I was hiding anything, but because she never asked. I moved what I could, securing it where she couldn't reach. The third, to a lawyer friend of Jeff's. A man named Blake. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of tone that made you believe he'd seen every dirty trick before. I explained my situation. The house. The accounts. The betrayal. We should meet, he said. The sooner, the better. I hung up the phone and closed my eyes, feeling something I hadn't since the hospital. Control. Not much, but enough to remind me I wasn't helpless. Dana thought she'd taken everything. But all she'd really done was light a fire. The hardest part wasn't the chest pain or the fatigue. It was the waiting. Every day at Jeff's felt like limbo, me pacing his kitchen while he headed off to work, the silence pressing in around me. I wasn't built for sitting still. Truckers don't wait, we move. But now, movement had to be careful. Calculated. By the end of that first week, I knew I couldn't just rely on lawyers and banks. I needed to see it with my own eyes. My house. My wife. Whatever was left of the life I'd built. Don't do it, Jeff warned when I told him. You're not ready. Physically, emotionally, hell, in any way. I won't go inside, I said. I just need to know. So one evening, just after dark, I drove my old Chevy pickup back to the neighborhood. I parked 2 streets over and walked slow, the autumn air cool against my skin. Every step felt like trespassing into a life that used to be mine. The house looked the same. Same porch light, same flower beds Dana had once nagged me to keep neat. But there were little differences. A car I didn't recognize in the driveway. A jacket hanging on the porch rail, not mine. Through the window, I saw her. Dana, laughing at something on the TV. And next to her, Harold. My neighbor. A beer in his hand, his body slouched into the couch cushions like he belonged there. I stood in the shadows, my hands trembling, but not from anger. Not yet. It was something colder. A numb realization that Harold, the man who'd once helped me move a refrigerator into that very house, was now warming himself in my spot. For a second, I thought about marching up to the door. But what would I say? That I'd survived. That the bank was investigating? That she couldn't possibly erase 2 decades with a forged smile and another man's arm around her? No. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo from across the street. Proof. Not for me, I already knew. But for the courts, the bank, the lawyer. Every lie she'd spin would have to answer to the truth I carried in my pocket. I turned and walked away before they could spot me. My chest ached, but I kept my pace steady. Each step back to the truck was another reminder. I wasn't dead. I wasn't done. When I got back to Jeff's, I showed him the photo. He swore under his breath, shaking his head. Damn, Cam. You sure you're ready for this war? I looked at him, steady. She declared it the minute she took my last dollar. Blake met me in a quiet corner booth of a diner off Route 6. Not the kind of place for polished lawyers in tailored suits, but that was the point. He was local, low profile, the kind of man who worked more out of principle than prestige. He slid a legal pad onto the table. Start from the beginning, he said. So I did. The heart attack. The hospital. The drained account. The photo of Dana with Harold. Through it all, Blake didn't interrupt. He just scribbled in neat, sharp lines, nodding once in a while, his coffee cooling untouched. When I finished, he leaned back. Joint account cases are tricky. She had legal access. But the context, your medical state, the timing, the betrayal, makes this something we can work with. Especially if we bring in hospital records. I slid my phone across the table, the photo of Dana and Harold glowing under the dim light. And this. Blake studied it for a moment, then looked up at me. Proof of infidelity won't get you your money back. But it will help in divorce court. Property division, alimony, spousal claims, it all changes if we prove she was unfaithful. The word divorce hit me like a steel pipe. Not because it was unexpected, but because it made everything final. 22 years boiled down to paperwork and signatures. Blake kept going. We'll start with financial discovery. Track where that $61,000 went. If she transferred it, spent it, hid it, we'll know. I'll subpoena bank statements, credit card activity. If she's living it up with Loverboy, we'll nail it down. His voice was calm, clinical. But beneath it, I heard the sharp edge of a man who'd gutted liars before. Cam, Blake said, lowering his tone, this won't be quick. And it won't be clean. She's going to fight back. Lie. Maybe even flip the story, paint you as unstable, especially after your heart attack. You ready for that? I looked him dead in the eye. She left me to die. Then she robbed me. Then she replaced me. If she wants a war, I'll give her one. Blake studied me a long moment, then gave the faintest nod. All right. First strike, we freeze what's left. I'll draft the paperwork tonight. You'll need to sign. I signed without hesitation, my hand steady for the first time since the hospital. As Blake gathered his papers, he said something that stuck with me. Revenge feels good, but it's fleeting. Justice, that sticks. Play this smart, and she'll lose more than money. Driving back to Jeff's, I replayed those words in my head. Justice. Revenge. Maybe I didn't have to choose. Maybe, if I was careful, I could have both. A week later, Blake called. His voice had that clipped edge lawyers get when they're holding something sharp. We've got movement, he said. At his office, he spread the papers across his desk like a map of betrayal. Bank statements, card transactions, transfers, all with Dana's name stamped in cold, black ink. She pulled $40,000 in cash the day after your heart attack, Blake said, tapping the page. Another 15 a week later. Smaller withdrawals here and here. Credit card swipes at places that don't exactly scream grieving wife. I leaned forward. Where? He slid me the list. A jewelry store in Council Bluffs. A boutique hotel 2 counties over. Restaurants I'd never set foot in, places with wine lists longer than my rig. And then there was the kicker. A down payment wired to a realtor's trust account. $48,000. I felt the air go thin around me. She's buying a house. Blake nodded. Not in her name, though. In Harold's. For a long time, I just stared at the page. My wife, the woman who once cried when I surprised her with a fixer-upper in Lincoln, the woman who swore she wanted nothing but a simple life, was pouring my years of savings into a new home with my neighbor. I didn't shout. I didn't break. I just sat back in the chair and let the truth settle like a stone in my chest. Blake watched me carefully. This is good for us, Cam. Really good. It's proof she diverted marital funds into another relationship. Courts don't look kindly on that. Good for us, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. He leaned forward, his pen tapping against the papers. Listen to me. This isn't just about clawing back what's yours. With this, we can position you as the wronged party. The one who sacrificed, worked, saved, only to be abandoned and stolen from. Judges eat that up. I left his office with a folder full of evidence and a head full of noise. Driving back, I couldn't stop picturing Dana walking through some shiny new house with Harold, laughing like the future was theirs. My money paying for their fresh start. But as the miles passed under my tires, something colder than anger took root in me. She thought she was building a life without me. What she didn't realize was that every receipt, every transfer, every brick in that new house was becoming a weapon in my hands. The trail of money wasn't just proof of theft. It was a map. And I was learning how to read it. Blake spread the files across his conference table like a general laying out battle plans. Numbers, names, dates, they weren't just transactions anymore. They were ammunition. "We'll open with a petition to freeze assets," he said. "She won't see it coming. One morning she'll wake up and her accounts will be locked tight. No spending. No withdrawals. Nothing." I pictured Dana at the breakfast table, her smile fading when the card declined. For the first time since the hospital, I felt something like satisfaction. "Then we press discovery," Blake continued. "We demand receipts, contracts, communication logs, emails, texts, anything that ties Harold to the funds. The realtor transfer is a smoking gun, but we'll want more." "What about the house?" I asked. Blake's eyes narrowed. "If it's proven she used marital assets for another relationship, we can claw back the funds. The court could even force a sale." I nodded slowly. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about undoing the future she thought she was building with him, brick by brick. Jeff leaned against the wall, arms crossed, silent until now. "Sounds like war," he muttered. Blake looked at me. "It is. But remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about leverage. The more we prove, the stronger your position. Custody of assets, spousal claims, even damages." His words were clean, professional. But my thoughts weren't. I wasn't just imagining Dana losing accounts and property. I was imagining the moment she realized the man she left in a hospital bed wasn't gone. That he was standing, watching, turning her every lie into her undoing. Before I left, Blake handed me a notepad. "Document everything. Every message, every call, every sighting. If Harold sets foot in that house again, get photos. The more detail, the better." That night, back at Jeff's, I opened the pad and wrote the first entry. September 28th, saw Dana and Harold at my house, together. She drained $61,438.72 from joint account. Evidence collected. Trail is clear. The handwriting was jagged, uneven. But it was a start. As I closed the notebook, a thought crossed my mind, sharp and steady. She thought she'd ended my story. But all she did was give me a new one to tell. I became a ghost in my own life. Not gone, not visible, just present enough to see everything without being seen. Jeff called it surveillance. I called it patience. Dana had always underestimated me. She thought I was a man who only knew highways and diesel engines, someone too simple to notice the small shifts, the late nights, the new clothes, the passwords that changed without warning. But 22 years behind the wheel taught me something. Patience isn't weakness. It's how you survive. Most nights, I parked Jeff's old Ford a block away from the house I used to call mine. The curtains glowed with lamplight. Sometimes Dana's silhouette moved across the living room, sometimes Harold's broad frame followed behind. It twisted my gut at first, seeing them together in the place I paid for, but soon that twisting became fuel. Every sighting, every laugh carried through the open window was another piece of rope for them to hang themselves with. I took photos from the street. I logged dates, times, plates of Harold's Audi. My niece Megan helped me catalog everything, turning it from scraps of suspicion into a clean timeline. Chain of evidence, she called it. If you're going to fight this in court, we make it airtight. The more we documented, the clearer the pattern became. Harold wasn't just visiting, he was staying. Nights stretched into weeks. Deliveries arrived at odd hours, furniture, a new flat screen, expensive wine by the case. All bought while Dana was crying poverty in her lawyer's filings. Sometimes, when the anger pressed too hard against my ribs, I'd grip the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. My chest still ached some nights, a reminder of how close I'd come to never waking again. I thought of the doctor saying, "We're losing him." And then I'd look through the lens, capturing Harold carrying in groceries like he belonged there. "Don't act on impulse," Blake had warned. "Impulse ruins strategy." So I swallowed the impulse. No confrontations. No pounding on the door. Just silence and records. Every betrayal frozen in time, waiting for the right judge, the right courtroom, the right moment to break them open. One night, around midnight, I caught them stepping onto the back porch. Dana had a glass of wine, Harold a beer. She laughed, loud, careless. The sound used to light me up inside, now it burned like acid. Through my camera zoom, I caught Harold leaning in to kiss her. She didn't resist. Didn't even hesitate. Click. Evidence. I lowered the camera and whispered to myself, "Keep laughing, Dana. Every smile's another nail in your coffin." The irony wasn't lost on me. She thought she'd buried me in a hospital bed. She thought I was gone. But in truth, I'd never been more awake. The first crack in Dana's armor came by phone. Not directly to me, she knew I wasn't answering anymore, but to Blake. He called me that afternoon, his voice measured but laced with something close to satisfaction. "She's offering a deal," he said. I sat up straighter in Jeff's kitchen chair. "What kind of deal?" Blake shuffled papers on his end of the line. "Dana is willing to return 50% of the withdrawn funds, about $30,000, in exchange for an equal stake in the house." I almost laughed. "The house she hasn't paid a dime on since I refinanced it in my name." "That one," Blake confirmed. Silence stretched between us. I could picture her face, coached by Patricia Wells, thinking she was clever, offering crumbs while reaching for the only real asset that mattered. "She's testing you," Blake continued. "It's not a real offer. It's bait. They want to see if you're desperate, if you'll settle cheap." "Then what do we tell them?" I asked. "Nothing. Let them sweat." I hung up and stared at the wall. The offer wasn't insulting, it was revealing. Dana wasn't confident anymore. The freeze on her accounts, the scrutiny of discovery, the late nights she thought nobody noticed, it was wearing her down. She was playing defense now. That night, Jeff found me on the porch with my notebook open. "She made her move, he asked. I nodded. "Half the money for half the house." He snorted. "Hell of a trade. You'd have to be dead to take that deal." The words lingered, sharp and ironic. Dead. That's what she thought I was when she drained everything. In her mind, Cameron Doyle was a fading photograph. But here I was, alive, documenting, circling like a hawk. The next morning, Megan stopped by on her way to class. She laid a folder on the table. "You'll like this," she said with a smirk. Inside were highlighted statements from Dana's secret account. Transfers, deposits, withdrawals. All timed to my absence. "Look at the dates," Megan urged. "Every major withdrawal lines up with Harold's big purchases, the Audi lease, the shed materials, even his new landscaping. They weren't just spending together. They were nesting." My stomach tightened, but not with sorrow. With clarity. They weren't building a new life, they were building it with my money, on my land, under my roof. I closed the folder and leaned back. Good. Let them decorate their cage. "Cage?" Megan asked. I met her eyes. "Yeah. Because when the judge slams it shut, all they'll have left are receipts of how they played house while I was fighting to stay alive." The trap was set. And Dana had just stepped into it, thinking she was clever enough to bargain her way out. Jeff spotted the sign first. We were driving past Harold's place when he slowed the truck and pointed. "For sale," he said flatly. There it was, staked into Harold's manicured front yard, a realtor's sign, bold letters announcing his escape plan. My pulse quickened. His cutting and running. Jeff nodded grimly. And taking her with him, if I had to guess. That night, Megan confirmed it. She had access to records most people wouldn't know how to find. Her voice came through the phone sharp, almost triumphant. "Harold withdrew 90 grand in cashier's checks. 2 days ago." The room tilted for a second. 90,000. He wasn't just moving, he was stripping everything down to cash, liquid, untraceable. I called Blake immediately. "We need to act now. He's going to vanish." Blake didn't hesitate. Then we cut him off. "Emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. We freeze everything, his accounts, her accounts, property transfers. If he's running, he won't get far." The next morning I woke with a pit in my chest, a weight like gravel pressing down. Not fear, anticipation. I knew how this worked. Trucking taught me, once a runaway rig starts downhill, you can't chase it, you block the road ahead. At 2 p.m., Blake walked into the courthouse with me trailing behind. His suit was immaculate, his briefcase packed like a weapon. Judge Harmon takes a very dim view of flight risk, he murmured. Let's show him what they've been planning. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, electric. Dana sat stiff beside Patricia Wells, her hair pinned tight, her eyes darting. Harold wasn't allowed in, this wasn't his case. But I could feel him outside, waiting, circling like a vulture. Blake presented the evidence with surgical precision. The withdrawals, the house listing, the cashier's checks. He laid it out like railroad tracks, leading straight to one conclusion. Harold Jensen and Dana Doyle were preparing to disappear. Judge Harmon adjusted his glasses, unimpressed by Wells's counterarguments. Your client cannot claim financial stability while her associate liquidates assets and prepares to sell property, he said. Then, with a sharp tap of his pen, I'm granting the injunction. Effective immediately, all assets belonging to both parties are frozen. Neither may leave the county without explicit court approval. The gavel fell like a gunshot. Dana's face drained of color. For the first time since this all began, she looked cornered. Outside the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of Harold in the parking lot. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard with frustration. He didn't notice me watching from across the asphalt. And maybe it was cruel, but I smiled. Because this wasn't just about stopping him from running, it was about making him sit still while the walls closed in. 2 mornings after the injunction, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect. We need to talk. Just you and me. No lawyers. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Dana. I stared at it for a long time. The woman who drained me dry while I lay unconscious, who laughed on the porch with Harold like I was a ghost, was now asking for a private audience. I showed the text to Jeff over coffee. He squinted at the screen, then shook his head. She's not reaching out for closure. She's reaching out because she's drowning. Don't throw her a lifeline. Still, when the knock came at Jeff's door that evening, something in me stirred. I didn't move right away. Her voice cut through the wood, muffled but clear enough. I know you're in there, Cameron. Your truck's parked down the street. Silence. I sat in the chair, heart thudding, eyes fixed on the grain of the table. You can't just hide forever, she went on, louder now. We need to talk about this. About us. The word us made me laugh under my breath, bitter and sharp. There was no us. Not anymore. The knocking grew frantic, then stopped. For a moment, I thought she'd left. Then my phone buzzed again. I'm sorry about the money. I was angry. You've been distant for months, and I thought you were cheating. When I found out about the house refinancing, I panicked. Please. We can work this out. The message was a mix of excuses and desperation, the kind of half-truths people tell when they're cornered. And then came the line that froze me in place. There's so much you don't understand. I turned the phone face down on the table. If I looked at her words any longer, I might believe them. Through the blinds, I caught her silhouette retreating to the car. Shoulders slumped, movement stiff. For the first time, she looked small. Not powerful, not smug. Just fragile. But pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not anymore. When the engine started and her taillights disappeared into the night, Jeff stepped out from the hallway. He'd heard the whole thing. You handled that right, he said softly. She wanted a confession, or a reaction she could use against you. You gave her nothing. I nodded, though my chest ached in that old familiar way. Not from the heart condition this time. From restraint. From sitting still while the woman I'd once loved pounded on the door, begging for words I refused to give. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not yet. But the silence was louder than anything I could have said. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish, a place where secrets came to die. I sat across from Dana and Patricia Wells, her shark of a lawyer, as Blake laid a thick folder on the judge's bench. Your Honor, Blake began, calm and steady. This is discovery material obtained through lawful channels. It pertains to an account Mrs. Doyle has failed to disclose. Judge Harmon peered over his glasses. Failed to disclose. Blake slid the document forward. Yes, sir. An account opened 18 months ago in Dana Doyle's name, with regular deposits just under $10,000, timed with Mr. Doyle's trucking routes. The balance currently stands at $127,340.56. Dana stiffened, eyes flashing toward Patricia Wells. Her attorney's jaw clenched, but she forced her voice steady. Your Honor, these funds were for personal security. A woman in a strained marriage is entitled to ensure her future. The judge cut her off with a raised hand. Deposits structured under federal reporting limits. That doesn't sound like security, counselor. That sounds like concealment. Blake didn't flinch. He pulled out another sheet. And it gets worse. Records show an authorized user on this account, Harold Jensen. The name dropped like a stone in the room. I watched Dana's face, the way her lips parted, the faint tremor in her hand as she reached for the edge of the table. She didn't deny it. Couldn't. Blake pressed on. Additionally, we've traced expenditures to hotels in Minneapolis, including a reservation under Harold Jensen's name, while Mr. Doyle was documented working in Seattle that same week. The pattern is clear: financial diversion and marital infidelity. For once, Patricia Wells had no sharp retort. She shuffled papers, avoided eye contact with her client. Judge Harmon leaned back, his expression hardening. Mrs. Doyle, do you wish to explain why your neighbor has been using a concealed account in your name? Dana's voice broke for the first time in court. Your Honor, it wasn't like that. Like what, Mrs. Doyle? The judge pressed. Because from where I sit, it looks like deliberate fraud against your husband while he was incapacitated in the hospital. Her mouth opened, then closed again. No excuses came. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched the truth unravel in front of everyone, the woman who thought she held all the cards, stripped down to silence. Blake gathered his papers with precise movements. Your Honor, given the concealment of assets and the established affair, we request that Mr. Doyle be awarded majority distribution of the marital estate and exclusive possession of the home. The judge nodded once. Motion taken under advisement. But I will say this now, this court takes a very dim view of exploiting a medically vulnerable spouse. Very dim indeed. Dana's eyes darted to me then, wide and pleading, as though I might throw her a lifeline. I gave her nothing. Just the same silence I'd given at Jeff's door. Because the time for words was over. The truth was speaking for me now. Harold blinked out of the picture almost overnight. The realtor yanked his listing from the market the morning after the injunction. His Audi disappeared from the driveway a week later. By the time Megan checked the utilities on his place, everything was shut off. Harold Jensen had gone to ground. It wasn't courage. It was self-preservation. He saw the walls closing in, and unlike Dana, he didn't have to sit in court and answer for it. He could vanish into the wind, let her carry the weight. And she did. By the time the next hearing rolled around, Dana looked like she hadn't slept in days. The perfect hair was gone, replaced with a messy knot. Her suit didn't fit the way it used to. Even Patricia Wells seemed tired of her, short answers, clipped whispers at the table. Blake moved with calm efficiency, laying out bank statements and timelines like a surgeon lining up instruments. Every exhibit drew Dana tighter into herself, until she stopped even trying to refute them. The judge leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Mrs. Doyle, this court finds sufficient evidence of concealed assets and financial misconduct. Combined with your extramarital relationship with Mr. Jensen, it constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty to your husband. Dana flinched. Patricia Wells shifted, but she didn't object. The judge's voice carried like iron across the room. Accordingly, the court awards Mr. Doyle full possession of the marital residence and 65% of the divided estate. Furthermore, Mrs. Doyle is ordered to repay $30,000 directly to Mr. Doyle as partial restitution. The gavel cracked once, final and merciless. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. But inside, something uncoiled. A knot I'd carried since the hospital loosened just a little. Not victory, more like release. Dana didn't look at me as we filed out. She stared at the table, at her hands, at anything that wasn't my eyes. The woman who once controlled every room now couldn't lift her head. Outside, Jeff clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. Told you. House, land, and your name cleared. She's the one left with scraps. Blake adjusted his cufflinks, satisfied but measured. She'll file appeals. Patricia won't let this die clean. But for now, you've won. And I believed him. For the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt like I had air in my lungs that belonged to me again. Dana's empire had collapsed. And Harold. He was just another ghost, same as I'd been to them. Winning in court didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like walking away from a wreck, alive, but still smelling smoke. Jeff noticed it first. You ain't sleeping, he said one night, dropping a beer on the porch rail beside me. You won, Cam. She can't touch you now. I didn't answer right away. The cicadas screamed in the trees, the same sound I used to hear coming home from long hauls. Back then, the house felt like a safe harbor. Now it felt like something reclaimed from a fire. Megan called the next morning. She's circling, Cam. Dana's been spotted at the courthouse filing a motion to reconsider. Wells is dragging her feet, probably to milk the last billable hours out of her, but they're not letting it go. Let them file, I said. The record's against her. Megan hesitated. Yeah, but don't underestimate desperation. A person who's lost everything doesn't think straight. That same week, Harold resurfaced. Not in person, cowards like him rarely do, but through whispers. Megan dug up a traffic citation in Iowa. Same Audi, same plates. Just a ticket for running a stop sign. But proof enough he hadn't vanished into dust. He's keeping his head down, Jeff said when I showed him. Probably hoping if he lays low long enough, the storm passes. But storms don't just pass. They leave wreckage. Dana called me one more time. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened. Her voice was raw, strained. You don't understand. Harold left me. The house, the account, all of it, gone. I don't have anywhere to go. Please, Cameron, we can fix this. I was wrong. I was angry. Don't let this be how it ends. Her words cracked and broke, like glass under pressure. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the instinct to protect, to shoulder the weight. But then I remembered her sitting on that porch with Harold, my money in her hands, my name on the mortgage she was trying to take. I deleted the message. The house was mine again. The land too. Blake had drawn up the paperwork, stamped and filed, ironclad. But peace. That was going to take longer. Because I knew people like Dana and Harold. They didn't accept collapse. They clung to ruins. And sometimes, ruins could still cut you deep. The voicemail from Dana was the last olive branch she ever offered. After I deleted it, silence fell. No more calls. No more knocks. Just absence. But absence doesn't always mean peace. Blake warned me. She's not going to accept this quietly. People who lose everything often make reckless plays. He was right. 3 weeks later, Jeff woke me in the middle of the night. Cam, your truck alarm's going off. We stumbled outside with flashlights. The night air was sharp, the field stretching black under the stars. And there she was, Dana, fumbling at the truck door with something in her hand. Her face caught in the beam of light, pale, wild-eyed, nothing left of the composed woman I'd once married. Cameron, she gasped, spinning toward me. You don't understand, he left me with nothing. I deserve part of this. I earned it. Jeff stepped between us. Back away, Dana. Her voice cracked. You think you can just erase me? Pretend I didn't build this life with you? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even step closer. I just said the truth. You didn't build it, Dana. You tried to burn it down. And I survived the fire. For a moment, the weight of those words hung heavy. Her shoulders shook, her breath ragged. Then the flashlight beam caught what she was holding, a crowbar. Jeff moved fast. The tool clattered to the gravel. He didn't hurt her, just took it away, firm as stone. By the time the deputies arrived, Dana had gone quiet. Not weeping, Not raging. Just hollow. They led her away without a fight. Trespassing, attempted vandalism, violation of the court order. The law had teeth now, and she couldn't charm her way past them. That was the last time I saw her. Harold's fate came months later, in a letter Megan handed me with a wry smile. He'd been picked up in Nebraska, tied to a string of fraud cases. Bank manipulation, false credit applications, even his Audi had been bought on a doctored loan. He was heading for federal time. Guess you don't have to worry about him running anymore, Megan said. I set the letter aside and didn't give it another thought. Harold had always been a ghost of a man. Now he was a caged one. Dana, stripped of her lawyer and her lover, took a plea on the charges. No prison, but probation, fines, restitution. The last I heard, she was working shifts at a diner 2 counties over. The Queen had fallen from her throne, and there was no crown waiting for her. The house was mine again, in more than just paperwork. The porch light glowed warm at night. The fields stretched quiet under the stars. Sometimes I'd sit out front with Jeff, beers in hand, silence between us. No words needed. Other nights, Megan would swing by with a stack of papers or just to talk, her laughter soft against the crickets. But most of the time, I was alone. And that was okay. Because I wasn't empty anymore. The storm had passed, and though it left scars, it left me standing. Alive. Breathing. Whole. One evening, I opened the notebook I'd been filling since the hospital, the record of betrayal, trial, collapse. I wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. She thought I was dead. But I lived. And living is the one thing they could never take from me. Then I closed the book. The story was finished. And for the first time in a long time, so was I.